some of my talks. This particular one is fairly new. I've only given it once in Cape Town, so I hope that you guys are going to like it. It's an amalgamation of many different topics. We're going to touch on some medicinal compounds. We're going to touch on my research. All in all, it's just going to be a journey through Southern African fungi. I hope you guys find it interesting. I think the best place to start off is just with the name, the Lost Muti. This is an interesting one, so we'll dive into it a little bit more, but the whole idea is that here in Southern Africa, we have a huge repertoire, a huge armamentarium of different fungi that grow natively in our country, and our local people have been using them, but no one knows about it. And this presentation hopes to shine a light on that. This lost muti, this lost medicine, this lost spirit medicine or therapeutic medicine that has been lost to science, but not to the people. The people have been using these mushrooms. They've been using them for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and now we're hoping to re-illuminate this and show this to the world, because the world knows our botanical knowledge. We've got many, many books and many manuscripts that have been written about our traditional healers, our sangomas and the younger, and their uses of different botanicals. But sorry, let's go. Okay, but not much on fungi. So with this presentation, we're hoping to illuminate that and show the lost muti and shine a light on it for Southern Africa. So let's kick us off the journey so far. So my name is Cullen, and I said last night I'm a citizen scientist, just like you guys. My journey started when I was 21. If we're all friends in the crowd, I'm just going to be honest here. It started with a psilocybin journey. And I was 21 and I was working corporates and decided, one of my friends brought me a little mushroom. He's like, take this. And I was like, I don't know what this is. And I put it in my mouth and the world opened up to me. And I realized that I just couldn't go back to the normal, the mundane, for me, the corporate life. And I left that and I started a company, an amazing company called Ethnoycology. So they're AETHER, and Ether has been operating for 9 years now in the medicinal space. We've been manufacturing extracts and working with doctors and pharmacies and health stores all around the country, supplying medicine to people, helping thousands upon thousands of people all around the country, and now even internationally as well, with ailments and maladies. We take our jobs very seriously. But along this route, along this path of falling in love with fungi, I discovered something really interesting. I discovered, exactly like I said before, that our people have this rich history of knowledge, and I needed to document this. So I'm going to leave it there and then tell you about the Better World Foundry in a second. But this has been the journey so far. It's been a 9-year ordeal. I'm going to run you through a couple of different topics today. We're going to start off with the beginning point, because I think that's the best place to start. Why not start right at the beginning? The history of worldwide fungal use. And now, keep in mind, this is a really rudimentary history. You can tack on more, you can take stuff away. Science is always changing. But we're going to try and unpack as much of this as possible and then go into Southern Africa and uncovering the fungal use in Southern Africa. Touch on a little bit of rock art and myth, because that's always interesting. And then where to from here? How do we progress from here? So if everyone's excited, if you guys have got some coffee, I've got some coffee here. My lovely girlfriend and I stayed up way too late chatting last night, so if I forget some Latin names, I'm so sorry. Hopefully the coffee will help me a little bit. You guys ready? Let's kick it off. Ooh, sorry. So, mush migration. Worldwide, our planet didn't look the way that it currently does. We know that our planet was a rock at one point in time. Meteors hitting into it. There was water that came and went. But our planet was very different to the way that it looks today. It was one supercontinent. It broke apart and then came back together. This supercontinent is a really interesting topic to dive into, because it shows that there are species that are linked across the oceans. And this is because at one point in time they were together. So our journey begins here when the world was just a rock. About 2.4 billion years ago, we get our first representation of fungal life start to emerge. Now, this amazing fungal network over here, this is a fossilized fungal network, mycelial network, that's 2.4 billion years old, and was found here in the Onkeluk Formation in the Northern Cape. And this fungal network was at one point buried beneath the ocean in basalt rock. 2.4 billion years ago, fungi learned how to form hyphal networks, and they retain that principle to this day. They're still using that network to this day, 2.4 billion years ago. If we progress a little bit more, we see that fungi go from being fungal networks coming onto land out of the ocean and pop marking themselves against rocks and starting to break down. Fungi did this, bacteria did this, various different organisms started to do this and break rocks, the calcium carbonate inside of that, and form our first soils. Now this is a very interesting time because about 350 million years ago, fungi ruled the roost. They grew tall and they littered the landscape. We have this specimen over here called Prototaxites. And Prototaxites was a 6-7 foot tall fungal structure that was all over the earth at that point in time. There were many different fungal structures there, but you can see that these organisms were fairly large. However, as we progress in the lineage and the story, we see that fungi start to get a little bit smaller. They start to find their ecological niches. We know of this about 115 million years ago in the Crato Formation in Brazil. Fungi got smaller and they figured out something great. They figured out how to reproduce efficiently. They formed a stipe and a cap, and they released their spores into the atmosphere, and they've kept this process for 115 million years, which shows incredible intelligence. It shows that they are efficient, they know how to reproduce, and they can get the job done, and they've kept that. So I think from this we can start to deduce that fungi aren't just things that we should pass by. We should maybe take them a bit more seriously. They're incredibly intelligent. If we progress a little bit more, we start to see the world split apart. And human beings come onto the earth about 300,000 years ago, give or take. About 300,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans come onto the planet. Our earliest known depictions of this are here in Southern Africa. I don't know how you guys feel, but I love this country. I think this is an amazing place. Show of hands, you guys love this place? It's magical. There's something magical about this. It's the cradle of humankind. This is potentially the birthplace of our ancestors. And they migrated up into Europe. Some of them went across into Asia, some into Australasia, some across the Bering Straits, or potentially by sea into the Americas. This is still hotly debated and an emerging science, but we can see that human beings littered the landscape. We went everywhere. And the craziest thing is that everywhere we went, we start to see fungal-human interaction. So our first official story that we currently have in the science, and keep in mind, this is going to be as much of a scientific approach as possible. We're going to maybe dabble in a bit of mythology and stuff, but for this preliminary part, we're going to just talk about what's currently known in the literature. If there's any other things that you guys want to discuss, we can at the end, definitely. So our first fungal-human interaction comes from this amazing discovery up in Spain. About 16,000 years ago, this woman up in a cave was buried. They call her the Red Lady of Almiron. And this woman was a really interesting character because she was fairly elderly. If I remember correctly, she was over 40, which at that point in time was someone that lived to a great age. And it's speculated that potentially this woman was a high-standing figure, or she was potentially a priestess. We don't quite know just yet, but what's really interesting is that just before her death, she consumed something, and we know that she consumed something because it's stuck in her dental enamel. In her teeth were two isotopes, spore isotopes that were found. The one is a Boletus fungus, which if you're here on Hogsback, you've probably eaten the Boletus mushroom, right? Really tasty mushroom. And then the other one, which scientists discovered inside of her dental enamel, was the spore from an Amanita muscaria mushroom. And she consumed this fairly close to her death. It wasn't what killed her, but it was something that she consumed just before dying. And there's a lot of speculation that we can take from this. Potentially she was using this mushroom, which we'll chat into in a second, to access an altered state of consciousness. Perhaps she was using it to transition to the afterlife. We don't know, but what we can deduce is that 16,000 years ago, mushrooms and humans interacted. That is fascinating. That gets me going. That's really exciting. It shows that we and mushrooms have cohabitated for a very long time. If we progress a little bit more, we start to see rock arts start to crop up all around the world. Very similar rock arts. The Sindawi people and the Bradshaw people from Australia depict very similar things of people with these big mushroom heads. We don't quite know if this is maybe just the hair or heads, maybe trying to depict something else. But it is fascinating that there's these two depictions, especially in cultures that we know that use mushrooms to this current day. These rock arts are about 15,000 years old. We progress a little bit more, and we start to see a really amazing representation in northern Africa. The Tsatsili, Algeria, yeah, the Tsatsili mushroom shaman that was discovered. Now, this mushroom shaman has these, what looks like mushroom iconography growing out of him. This potentially shows human mushroom interaction. This is about 4,700 years, or about 6,700 years ago. Again, in Spain, we see the Selva Pascal rock art, which potentially showcases bovine or ruminants with mushrooms. If you know anything about psychedelic mushrooms, you know that they are coprophilous mushrooms. They do grow on dung. So why would our ancient ancestors show this if it wasn't important? We see more, guys. There's so much all around the world of fungal human interaction. Up until now, up until about 3,400 BC, these have all been speculation. We can only speculate as to what these things are. But our first hard evidence of humans using mushrooms to alter their biome inside of them comes from this amazing individual right over here called Otzi the Iceman. He's a fairly good-looking guy. You can see in the top left-hand corner there. I don't know what he's doing, but he looks cool. So Otzi's a really interesting character because Otzi is from the Otzal Alps. And Otzi he was a Bronze Age man that lived about 5,400 years ago. And Otzi, unfortunately, was running through the mountains. He was running for his life. We know this because he was shot in the shoulder just before he died with an arrow. And Otzi fell through a glacier into an ice patch, and he was frozen solid, which sucks for Otzi. It really does, but it's amazing for us because from this we can deduce exactly what Otzi had done just before his death, weeks, days prior. Now, Otzi is really interesting because we know exactly what he ate. We know what was in his gut. You guys want to take a guess?
Mushroom.
I wish it was Marmite on toast. I'm just joking. It wasn't Marmite on toast. I do like a good Marmite on toast. So, Otzi had some bread, he had some meat, definitely. When looking at his gut, though, scientists discovered something really interesting. They discovered a parasitic tapeworm within his gut. Now, this could have been detrimental to most people back then, but Otzi had a medicine with him. He carried on his person 2 different fungi. We've got this one right over here on the top. This is the Inonotus obliquus mushroom, the chaga mushroom, which we don't know if he was using it medicinally, but what we do know is that people back then were using this as a tinder to keep and carry sparks or flames over great distances. You can do it currently. You can take an ember and you can hollow out a little bit of several different mushrooms. You can pack it inside there and close it up, and it can smolder for many, many hours. So you can take it over great distances. Now that's great. But Otzi does have another fungus on his person, this white one over there in that circle. Now, this is a polypore that is highly medicinal, and you know what it kills? Parasitic tapeworm. So Otzi knew exactly what affliction he had, and he potentially had a medicine to combat this. Now this shows amazing intelligence from our ancestors. The only issue is, if you know anything about antibiotics, you got to do your course, a week-long course. If you don't do it, you don't get rid of it. So Otzi unfortunately didn't finish his course. I'm sure he would have, and combated his ailments. But this is an amazing story to me because it shows that our ancestors, contrary to what we believe, and Darren will chat into this a lot more than me, our ancestors have this interaction of fungal and human linking potentially as foods or therapeutics, or even we'll touch in on this as entheogens. So let's progress a little bit more. We see the Mesoamerican people, the Maya and the Olmec, and the Zapotec, the Aztec, all revering fungi. Some of them even revering them so much as to name them as a deity. Teonanacatl is believed to be fungal in iconography, the Psilocybe mexicana mushroom that these people would consume, and they gave it a name, Teonanacatl, which means flesh of the gods. We see iconography all around Mesoamerica and South America. We see the great houses of Greece, also depicting fungi. Ganesh was wonderful to chat into this yesterday, but let's unpack it a little bit more. The Eleusinian Mysteries. Anyone ever heard of the Eleusinian Mysteries? Can I take a sip of this while we just think? So the Eleusinian Mysteries are an interesting one because pretty much all of our forefathers of democracy and mathematics and philosophy attended these. People like Aristotle and Socrates, and even Marcus Aurelius. I just got his book for Christmas, Meditations. Potentially going to be a good read. I'm very excited about that. These people would go to a ceremony. They would travel huge distances at that point in time to a place called Elysius, and they would attend a ceremony. They wouldn't be allowed to enter the ceremony for 3 years. They would have to sit at the door and watch in, and only once they passed that point of the 3-year mark could they enter and actually partake in the ceremonies. Ceremony devoted to Persephone, Demeter. Now, the ceremony is a really interesting one. A great author named Brian Murarescu writes about it in his book, The Immortality Key. Worth a read if you guys want to jot it down. And what scientists have found currently is that these mysteries in the ancient texts would talk about drinking a beverage called the kaikion. And this beverage would transport you to the underworld, and you would get to convene or communicate with divinity, with the goddess. You would die a death before dying, essentially, and you would come back with knowledge. To me, that sounds very much like a psychedelic experience. So, scientists did the amazing work of trying to find chalices to try and deduce, okay, what was this kaikion, this beverage, made out of? And we have a recipe. It's a very simple recipe. It's barley, it's water, and it's mint. That's the recipe. That doesn't sound to me like a very psychoactive brew. But in Elysius, just across the way from the temple, there are fields there that are still to this day littered with barley, contaminated with ergo fungus. And ergo fungus can be processed to make something very similar to LSD. So our ancient ancestors were consuming psychoactive beverages. And this has been proven because the chalices that these scientists have found, they've tested, and they've found remains of ergo inside of these chalices. So our forefathers of democracy, the people that we held in such high esteem, were psychonauts. Sorry guys, they were psychonauts. They were tripping. Has anyone ever done a psychedelic experience here? Has anyone convened or chatted to divinity in that process? Yeah, maybe? So I'm sure that our ancestors in ancient Greece were doing some amazing traveling and learning some phenomenal stuff about themselves and the world. So let's progress a little bit more here. We see, I'm actually going to leave Egypt because I know that you probably have a lot of Egypt, so I actually want to leave it all to you, man. So I'm passing on. We do have Siberian and the Anatolian goddesses, whale hunters depicting fungi. We see Christian iconography all around the world, potentially. Got to be very, very stern about that. Potentially depicting mushroom iconography. We see, this is definitely, we see the ancient Asian people, China and Japan and Korea, all revering mushrooms, like the Buddha holding a reishi fungus right over here. Kuan Yin in the right-hand corner there, holding a reishi mushroom. We see it cropping up in paintings and artifacts all around the world. And what this shows us is that humans all around the world have been using mushrooms. And I want to try and hammer this home to you guys. Everywhere on the planet we've been using mushrooms. But something really interesting is taking place. Right here in Southern Africa, we haven't done the work to showcase that our people, the cradle of humankind, have been using mushrooms. So I stumbled into this amazing world by living in the Eastern Cape. I was running my company out that side, still running from that side, and I got to spend some amazing times in the villages, speaking to various different traditional healers and learning about the different medicines that they have for our work. And we would co-work with these people. We use a lot of them as harvesters, and there's a lot of knowledge share that happens. It's a really, really interesting business that we run. But I stumbled into something really interesting. I found that, I had this fascination with fungi, and I wanted to learn about mushrooms. And I had heard while up on a mountain the one time, I was researching Schizophyllum commune. Marika brought it up earlier, the split-pickle fungus. And I'd seen that people in Central Africa had been using this mushroom and consuming it. And I thought, okay, this mushroom, I'd seen it up on the mountain. This mushroom's so interesting. I wonder if our people here use it. And I went to the literature, and I looked through all the books. And lo and behold, there was absolutely nothing, unfortunately. And I thought, this is so interesting. Why has no one Do our people not use these mushrooms? Or has no one taken the time to look? And the more I dug, the more I realized that there's ubiquitous fungal use all around the country, but no one, unfortunately, has taken the time to really dive deep and look and document and pay homage to our people, because our people are incredible. They have extensive knowledge of fungal use. So I set out on this job. I thought, I'm going to take up the mantle. And by no means am I an aficionado at all. I think there's way smarter people that would do probably a better job than I do. But unfortunately, at that point in time, no one had taken it up. This was 5 years ago. And I decided, I'm going to be the mouthpiece. I'm going to try and do this. And I'm going to try and do it to the best of my abilities. So I set out and I started traveling all around the country, speaking to traditional healers, up in the mountains of Lesotho, in the Muti markets of KZN, in Mpumalanga, Cape Town, pretty much everywhere that I could go. I've been talking to people on my travels. And this is what I've found, guys, is that not only do our people use mushrooms, but there's worship and reverence. There's gourmet food consumption. There's therapeutic use. And there's even entheogenic use in pretty much every single tribe all around Southern Africa. Our Bantu and Nguni people, the Khoi and the San, even people in the cities still use mushrooms. They get them from the homeland and they still grind them up and they still use them in the cities. And this is what this project is about. So let's go on a little journey here. If you guys are ready. Who's excited? I think let's go. So maybe to start us off here, I think I need to just illustrate the difference between two main classes of our healers. We have a Sangoma, who's an intermediary, a diviner between the spirit world and the physical world. This is someone that can connect to the ancestors and help to deduce problems. So if you have an ailment or an affliction, a malady, and you don't know what the cause of that is, you would go to a Sangoma, and the Sangoma would divine, figure that out, and then either prescribe a medicine to you afterwards, sort out your issue, prescribe a medicine to you, and then you go on your way, or recommend you to an Inyanga, essentially like a pharmacist. You go to the pharmacy, and then they would write a prescription for you, and then you'd be on your way. So an Inyanga is a medicine man, person that can blend and mix and grind and process herbs and roots and barks for you to use. Often this is done in natural cycles with the moons and with the changing seasons. There's high knowledge that's being integrated into this. So now that we have a rudimentary understanding, we can progress. I started out my travels and I found amazing representations of fungi being used. So this is an amazing one. So also I'm just going to preface this by saying everything that we see here is a first-time knowledge. So we currently don't have names for these fungi. We don't have indigenous names. We don't have use cases or monographs or traditional uses. So I'm going to run you guys through all of them. So this one is called Guadalimfene, and this is the Pisolithus fungus. This is that big one that you see in the blue gum forests, and often as kids we would kick them over. Remember that? And they go, psh. So Pisolithus fungus. It's also called the baboon snuff. Baboon snuff. Keep saying bamboo every time I do this presentation. So baboon snuff. And this is believed, or this name comes from the fact that the people believe that the baboons would stick their faces into it, and this is what would give them their colorings and their markings on their faces. But this mushroom has an amazing ability to combat combat microbes or bacterial infections on the skin. It has antimicrobial properties. So the traditional people all around the country process this. They grind it up and they apply it to wounds and abrasions to help with that. It's applied to the skin. The spore mass is applied to the skin. It's also used to dye clothing. It can produce a really wonderful dye for dyeing clothing. We've got isbindi, the reishi mushroom, one of my favorite mushrooms. This is the mushroom that got me hooked on fungi. I was in the Eastern Cape and I was wading through a riverbed and I saw this bright red lacquered shelf on one of the trees. This was about 6 years ago, probably more or less, and I broke this mushroom off of a tree and I was hooked. Now, this is my favorite mushroom, and it has high regard in the Eastern Cape, in Ponderland, in the Ciskei and the Transkei. It's called isbindi, and isbindi is an amazingly powerful mushroom that also has cultural significance as well. This mushroom is one of the most important mushrooms for a young boy becoming a man, his initiation ceremony. This mushroom is ground down. If you see here, it's ground down into a powder and applied to the body after he goes through his initiation rites. And he cannot become a man, this is what I'm told, until he has this powder applied to him. It gives him luck, and it gives him confidence and courage to go into the world. Now, this mushroom, Marika and I are working on something really cool, and we found that in various different cultures, depending on what tree the mushroom grows on, it will imbue different powers into the mushroom. So they go and they look for specific types of ispindi, ibumvu ones and yellow ones and various different types to try and take them, grind them down and imbue the child with this power. But this mushroom is also used as a therapeutic for asthma and for menstrual cramps. And then the most important one that I found is that it's also used for depression. Now, if you know anything about the literature, this mushroom is being studied all around the world for anxiety, for depression, and our local people know about this, and they have known about this, and their preparation methods are identical to the way that the ancient Chinese do them. They brew it and they steep it for a number of days, and they drink it slowly. There's a whole method that they consume this fungus, and it mimics or runs parallel to the literature and the ancient people all around the world, which is so fascinating to me. So I love this mushroom. I think it's a really interesting one. I'm good. I'll go fast. So there's various different types. We have various different Ganoderma in the country. Astrophicanum, there's sisal, there's a couple of different types. We're hoping that we've found a potential new black one. If it is new, my hope is that we can, again, like we've done with another one, is pay homage to the people and give it its actual name. Call it Ganoderma aspindii. Give it its name. I think that's very important. That's a lot of what the work we're doing is. We've also got Taupane yasaholo, which is the Podaxis mushroom. Now, this mushroom is really interesting. It's a fascinating mushroom. You guys ever seen this before? So Podaxis is really great and highly prized. Used mainly as a charm or as a spiritual tool. It's combined with a bunch of different things, but it can also be used to treat wounds and infections, very much like Guadalumpene. The magical use is what fascinates me. I wish my phone was charged. Unfortunately, I can't show you, but there's uses where it's combined with python fat and a bunch of different ingredients to help essentially bring luck to you. Or there's one where it's combined with a couple of different ingredients and even the gunpowder from a bullet. And this is to bring money back to you, essentially. This is to give it straight aim. This is what the people believe. And these things are made into various different charms and hung around the neck or planted in the house, at the door of the house. Huge reverence for this mushroom. Ooh, I think Professor Joe? Yes, is going to be talking about the Kalahari truffle. This is a very interesting one. Darren just got back from Namibia, if I'm not mistaken. Did you manage to find any Kalahari truffles out that side? I don't know if it's the season at the moment. Okay, I think it's May time, if I'm not mistaken, right? Okay, awesome. So this mushroom is amazing to me because it does link in with my other research, which we'll touch on in a second. But this mushroom is used by various different tribes in the Kalahari region, in the deserts of the Northern Cape as well. And it's consumed as a food source, but there's also a mythology associated with this fungus. It's believed that the thunderbird will fly and bring the rains and the thunder, and with this he lays his eggs into the ground. And the eggs pop up out of the ground, and the people harvest them, and the eggs are the Kalahari truffle. So I think this is great. We're going to hold on to that because that mythology is so important for later. Ikoa, we spoke about Ikoa earlier.
Just do that for your phone.
Oh, that's fine. I'm good, but thank you, man. The Termitomyces mushroom. This mushroom is an amazing source of food as well, and it's again used for various different ailments. It's made into a steam, it's processed into a powder and then put into hot water and then steamed. You cover your face with it like you would do with eucalyptus oil, and you would steam the face and get benefits from that. It would help with bladder disease and gastrointestinal disorders. It's used all around the country and consumed all around the country, and there's even a mythology associated with it, which we'll touch on in a second. I'm going to power through this if that's okay, guys. This one over here. Everyone's seen this mushroom. This is Amanita muscaria. Now, this mushroom has two names thus far that we've found. Inko Nkoe Bumvu, which means the poisonous red mushroom. It's also called umkamo wemfeme, which means the baboon's pee, essentially, because of the smell. Now this mushroom is used extensively also in various different cultures all around South Africa. It's used to help with stress and relaxation. It's smoked, it's powdered and drunk as a tea. It's used for fertility. It's even down here, just here in at the bottom of the mountain, it's powdered and applied to the umbilical cord after birth for children coming into the world. Amazing mushroom. This mushroom is really interesting as well because we have mythology all around the world of this mushroom being utilized. The one that fascinates me is the Vikings. And the Vikings, it's believed, before battle consumed a beverage called grut. And grut is a beer that's mixed with different herbs and botanicals. And it's believed that in this grut as well, we had Amanita muscaria that would be incorporated into it and drunk before battle, which would give them power and virality and vigor. Crazy thing is our Zulu people do this as well. There's stories of them just before battle powdering it and applying it as a snuff into people's noses. So we have this mushroom with similar use cases by warriors in the world. Why would this be? There's a global knowledge I think that we're missing here. Again, a couple other ones like Gymnopilus purpureosquamulosus, I think that's what it's called, it's a long name. Used as an amulet for protection. We've got Felinus ramosus, hung up for dreams like a dream catcher, and Paniolus mushrooms used similarly as well. This Paniolus is really cool because it's ground up, this one and then a couple other ones, this is Antilarium, ground up and applied into horses' noses before races. This one fascinates me though. This is a story that I acquired in Ponderland. The wild plum, the Harpyphyllum caffrum tree, has a really interesting story associated with it, that when these fruits drop down from the tree, they get to lay on the forest floor. They're left for several weeks by the local healers. Until such a time, they tell me that they get a white fur that grows on it. And the healers will go into the forest and go and take these. And they'll take it back to the village and they'll scrape off the white fur and they apply it to wounds and abrasions and cuts. I speculate that potentially this could be penicillin, or could be a microfungus, maybe zygomycota of some sort that has antimicrobial or beneficial properties that we don't quite know of. But our local healers have been using this, and they still to this day use this. We've got Mbuya, which is a blight fungus that's applied to arrows as a poison. As you can see, our people use tons of mushrooms, but we don't know about it. It's crazy, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. But on this journey, I was very lucky enough to discover or be part of a team that wrote about a new psilocybe species. I want to be very clear on that. Discover is such an interesting one because the local healers have been using this for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So let's rather say we scientifically documented it for Western audiences. So one for the history book. So this mushroom over here is Keo alaquaba. This is the Maluti mushroom, psilocybe maluti. Now, this mushroom I found on New Year's Eve in 2022 up in the mountains. There's been a couple people that have gone up since and found it as well. It's not a difficult one to find. It's fairly ubiquitous across the landscape. How am I doing for time? Am I good? Okay, awesome. So this mushroom is really interesting because it's a sectoidal fungus that doesn't open up its cap like other mushrooms. We believe that this is maybe because of the high wind or the altitude. Very unique. There is potentially another variety that looks quite similar up that side. I can't remember the name of it now, excuse me. Sorry, I told you I was going to forget Latin names. But this mushroom is really interesting because it's the first documented case of psychedelic mushroom use in a tribal setting in Africa. Hard solidified proof. Up until now we have really amazing anecdotal reports. Some really great ones from the 50s and the 60s. We've got stories being told everywhere. But what's great about this is now we've solidified. Our people do use psychedelic mushrooms. They have and they always will. These mushrooms are brewed into a beverage. They are concocted into a water beverage, applied with some other things like buophony, some really strong medicines, and drunk and consumed. And then the healer, either the traditional healer himself the lanole will sit in front of a mirror and divine and deduce an issue with a patient, or the patient will take it themselves and be guided through that process. Now, what's great about this mushroom is it's used for that, but there's also various other uses as well. It's applied to incisions in the abdomen for cramps. It's used to protect against evil. This is the starting point. There's so much more to discover here. Marika said 5% of our fungi have potentially been discovered. Imagine what is out there. Imagine the stories that we could tell if we all work together. Oops. There we go. Let's just let it load up and then I'll carry on. Okay, so from here, I've been traveling. Go for it, no?
Sorry, very quickly, you said the caps don't open up. How do they release spore? How do they
Okay,
continue?
so very cool. So we're trying to speculate. How is this done? There are ruminants up there that eat and then reproduce or excrete them. We've even found horses consuming them, and then even crows. So the name Kewa means the cigarettes of the crow. There's potential that these crows will pick them for some reason and then like fly off and then scatter them. All very up in the air at the moment. We need to dig a little bit deeper. We're going to be heading off to Lesotho next week, so hopefully doing a little bit more like on the ground research. So I found that these are only some of the uses. There's so many more that I haven't documented down. I haven't put into this presentation that are just sitting in my books, waiting to be told these stories. But what I found is that there's widespread use, and every single traditional healer that I've chatted to, the sangomas and the nyangas, the lanole, the sky herders, the ngaka, all of them have said that they've learned from their forefathers and their ancestors before them. It's a lineage that gets passed down. And I thought, okay, this is great, but how far back does it go then? If you were taught, like who taught you? Who taught them? And I needed, just to appease myself because I was restless, I needed to try and figure out where does this go to? And because our people are incredibly intelligent, they, as you can see, have amazing uses that rival other nations. I wanted to see how far back does it go, but I couldn't find any documented proof that would be useful for academia thus far. No written documentation, there's no books or anything written about it. I needed to turn to something else. I needed to turn to something that maybe stood the test of time a little bit better, something that would weather the storm, essentially. And we know there is one thing that weathers storms really well. It's our rock art. Why, if our people painted everything else that was of reverence to them, earlance and tribal life and foraging and hunting, if they've been using mushrooms and it goes back into antiquity, would they potentially document this as well? And that was the second part of the project that I set out on. So, were our kin wise to leave us clues? I want to let that sit for a second, because I think I found. So this is what I did. I went to the Witwatersrand University and I sifted through their rock art archives. It took me several months, and I have potentially discovered hundreds of depictions of what looks like fungal iconography. Now, we're going to take a second to suspend our disbelief, come in with an open mind, understand I am biased because I love mushrooms. I want everything to be mushrooms. But in academia, we need to be really rigid. We need to make sure that everything has a backing to back it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys photographs, and we're going to go down this journey together. And then you guys are going to tell me at the end what you guys think this looks like. So I think the best place to start is, when I was sifting through the information, could I potentially find something that looked fungal? Could I find something with a stipe and potentially a cap? That would be a good starting point. Maybe someone holding something. And that object that they were holding, I needed to make sure that it didn't look like anything else in the literature. It didn't look like a knopkiri or a fly whisk or potentially a tree or plant species, because we do know that there are plants that they held and they depicted. So I set out and I was like, okay, let me try and see, could I find something? And I found some really interesting iconography. I found this over here with a stipe and what looks like a cap. And I found these people over here holding these things with potentially a stipe and a cap, and a stipe and a cap, and a stipe and a cap. And I thought, okay, this looks great. This is a good starting point. This is a good starting point, but it's not hard evidence. This could be up to interpretation. And if of the images that I found, only some of them stick, then I've done a great job. So let's go a little bit further. So I went deeper and said, okay, if I could find them holding them, could I maybe find them picking them? because mushrooms would grow out of the ground. So could I find people, there's people bending down in the rock art quite often. So could I find someone bending down and potentially something in front of them with a stipe and what looks like a cap or a stipe and a cap in the corner, or people grabbing stuff with what looks like potentially a stipe and a cap. So I progressed a little bit more. I thought, this is great. I'm off to a good start. I seem to be a lucky fish. Maybe these images have been smudged over time. Maybe they have been disturbed or people added them. I don't know. Could I find something that was a little bit harder? Maybe a petroglyph or an engraving or something. So I went and I looked and I found it's a little bit blurry here, but you can see there's this over here with a stipe and what looks like a concave cap like that, and this over here, and we've got this one over here, and even what looks like stalked puffballs with nothing else in the area that looks anywhere similar. I thought, okay, this is great, but would this hold up? If I was to write a paper about this, would this hold up? I don't know. Let's go a little bit deeper. So I went a little bit deeper, and I think I wanted to try and find if they were using these things, is there some sort of mythology, and could I find a mushroom that was irrefutable, could be definitely a fungus. So I turned to some of the mythology in southern Africa where I knew there was fungal use, the San people, who used the Kalahari truffle. I'm going to pronounce this terribly, the Aba, I think it is. Kalahari truffle, we know that they have this mythology of the thunderbird and they consume them. Maybe they had some other mythologies. And I went and looked through and I found this really interesting iconography that kept popping up called formlings. And these formlings are often depicted as like a circle, or sometimes they're oblong shapes. And recently there was a paper, I think in 2015, that was published that spoke into this. These formlings have now been identified as termite mounds. And these termite mounds are revered. These formlings are revered and painted in the rock art. And for me, a mycologist or an amateur mycologist, this perks my ears up because I'm like, oh, I know what grows out of termite mounds, termitomyces, tasty mushroom. So I tried to look for some termite mounds, and I found this termite mound right at the center of this giant panel. This panel is probably as big as the like this wall over here. And right at the center, we see these two women leaning down with a circle, and at the center of the circle, we see these things popping out of the top of this termite mound with what looks like a stipe and a concave cap. Now look at that cap, it's got these edges hanging off of it. And if you look at termitomyces over here, you can see that when the cap unfolds, it curls down. And I thought, okay, this is great. So potentially, could this be termitomyces? I don't know, it's so abstract. I needed something a little bit harder. So this is what termitomyces, there's various different termitomyces species in southern Africa. This is what they look like. They generally have a long stipe that goes into the termite mound, and then the stipe is covered in dirt. When the cap doesn't unfurl, it sort of looks like a ball at the top with a pointed umbo. And I thought, okay, this is great. Let me see, can I find something a little bit harder? I needed to turn to some really sacred sites, and I found some other depictions, but they weren't hard enough to me. Formlings with these long stipes going down into the formlings, until I found this depiction over here. This is in Brandberg. It's called the White Shaman, and it's not a white person. It's a shaman that's painted all in white in clay, and this panel depicts some really important things happening in the village, in the tribal life. It's hunting, or it's gathering, or the sangoma at the center, the white sangoma. You can't really see because it's a bit blurry. It's a bit better on my computer. What's that? Oh, that one's better. Okay, right over here. Thanks, man. So you can see the white sangoma over here holding what looks to be a nymphia, a lily. And just to the right of the sangoma, we see a person, a depiction right over here holding something. And this is a very sacred rock art. This is depicting everything that's important, so a lot of things that are important. And I thought this guy looks so interesting because in his hand, he's holding, let me see here, he's holding these two objects. Sorry guys, it's quite blurry on the projector, but he's holding these two clear objects, one on this side and one on this side, with these potential stipes that are quite bulbous, with a brown part at the bottom. And this brown part to me looks incredibly similar to termitomyces mushrooms. It also has a pointed umbo and a cap, which is free floating from the stipe. It doesn't look like anything else in the rock art. And I thought to myself, this is so interesting. Why are they depicting this if it's not important, if it wasn't important to our people, surely hunter-gatherers depict the things that are important to them. They depict food and livelihood and family and dance and trance. If I was a hunter-gatherer, I would revere Ethnomyces because this is an amazing food source that grows in mass and would feed people, and currently to this day does feed people. So I thought this was great. Let's go a little bit deeper, one more time. So I wanted to try and see if they were using these mushrooms and there was reverence and worship, potential worship of these mushrooms. Could I maybe get lucky enough to find mushrooms being used to access altered states of consciousness? So again, I started at the beginning. I tried to find some ruminants or cattle, and every now and again I would find a cattle with people pointing at them, and then people holding things and exalting them up to the sky, with buck, with these things growing out of the ground. I even found in depictions where there are ruminants, sometimes they would show dung, and then out of the dung, sometimes this dung would just be balls. Out of the dung you would find these things popping out of the top of them, or fields with these objects just littered in the field, essentially, that look nothing else like the rock art that we see. This is open to interpretation. The rock art currently says Sangoma holding unidentified object. We don't currently know what it is. So this was a good start, and I thought, wow, this is great. Let me try and see if I can substantiate this being a psychedelic mushroom that these people are trying to depict. And I turned to these iconography all around the world. These are medicine bags, supposedly. In cultures all around the world, we see people holding medicine bags. We see it in Egypt and Asia and India and Mesoamerica. And there's a couple scientists that have come forward with a great hypothesis that potentially these medicine bags were what our shamans or sangomas held these sacraments in, the psychedelic substances that they would use to access these altered states. Now, it's a great, awesome theory. Can we find any proof for it? So I wanted to try and find some medicine bags. And South Africa is not short on medicine bags. We've got enough medicine bags. There's so much. There's medicine bags that are depicted on their own. There's medicine bags that people have climbed into as they transform into therianthropes. We'll talk about that. Bucks, to transport them into the spirit world. These medicine bags are believed to transport you into the spirit world or to carry the sacrament. Now, I want you guys to notice there's threads hanging off of this and a flattened part of the medicine bag on the top. So I tried to find some medicine bags that potentially showcase mushrooms, and I found this one over here, which again has these strands hanging off of it, and these things popping out of the top of the medicine bag with what looks to me like a flattened stipe, or a stipe, and then a flattened cap at the top. And they're all over there. Let's see if that one's a little bit better depicted. And we see a man over there holding something in his hand with a medicine bag. But again, this wasn't hard evidence. This wasn't going to substantiate my theory. As a collective, it might do a job of presenting a good theory. I needed something really solid. And that's when I turned to the therianthrope. So a therianthrope is a half man, half animal. When our sangomas access the spirit world, when they go into ecstatic dance or when they take a substance, they transform into an animal, a pure animal, in order to get them there, essentially. That we would have to become one with nature again to access the spirit world. And we get these therianthropes depicted all around the country, all around the world, actually. Half man, half animal. But we don't have solid proof of what this is. We have stories, great stories, and we have dance. But potentially, is there something missing from that story? I tried to set out to do this. And I found this couple of depictions of people holding things with stipes, putting them into their mouths, like this man over here, and vomiting. We know that vomiting is a very big symbol in the trance state. And even these people off to the right-hand side, completely seated. They're not moving, but they are flying, they are accessing another state. And in their hand, they're holding something which looks like it has a stipe and a concave cap. And the man all the way on the right has an open mouth. If you look very closely, his mouth is actually a jar, and he's putting it into his mouth like this. It's very interesting. It's worth a closer look. And then I found this. This is an amazing representation of the crocodile people in the Limpopo Valley and the Zimbabwe border in that area. And what this is we have the crocodile people in that area. These are therianthropes. These are their people that access the spirit world. And I saw this over here, this man exalting something up to the sky. Let's go on to this one. Exalting something up to the sky, holding it aloft, and transforming into a crocodile. He's perched down, and he starts moving off to the side. And right over here, we see a full crocodile. And in this crocodile's hand, we've got a clear line that goes past his hand with a pointed umbo. And I think to myself, this is so interesting. Why would they show this? Why would they not just show the crocodile? Maybe our ancestors were trying to say to us, hey, this is what I used. This is the medicine that I used. You need to find it. This is how it looks for future generations to come. So this is how big the panel is. It's quite a large panel. I wanted to find, this is this panel, this is a different one. This is Diana's vow. I'm going to end off with this one because it's quite interesting. So I wanted to see, could I substantiate a little bit more? And I found this panel over here, which again shows really important imagery in the rock art of the tribal setting, of hunting and gathering and being together and accessing an altered state. And even the shaman, the sangoma, we call him, right at the top of the panel. And it starts off over here with small images of people and hunting and bags and gathering. And right at the top, we see this sangoma laying down, completely laying down. And we know they know how to depict hands because this hand is normal. But coming out of his other hand, we see this thing stretch up to the sky and twist. And it flattens out at the top. Right at the top of the panel, above everything else, above the village, above the sangoma, we have what looks to me very strange and very mushroom-esque. Why on earth would they show this to us if it wasn't important? Okay, so I actually have one more. You know Mapungubwe? So there's many, many golden artifacts in Mapungubwe of lions and rhinos and handles for walking sticks and knopkiddies. A bunch of them. There's beadwork and there's nails and there's so many golden artifacts And I've chatted to a few of the people there, and there's new research coming out now that potentially, just like the lions and the rhino, there could also be golden mushroom iconography in Mapungubwe. Little golden statuettes, mushroom pottery, clay sculptures of mushrooms. There's a lot coming out of South Africa. I think our history is interwoven with mushrooms and we, as Westerners, don't even know it. I think our people have known it for a long time. And unfortunately, because of mass migration out of the villages, there's a lot of young people forgetting about it. So this project is in the making. I've been working on this for a little bit of time. And again, I am just a mouthpiece for this. Every single sangoma that is involved in this, their name gets jotted down and photographs get taken of them, and they share this knowledge as a collective. I want to show you guys a video if we've got 2 more minutes. How's the time? Sweet. There's an untold story of fungi, eager to be told, woven into the fabric of Southern Africa. A tale of medicine, reverence, and even worship painted on the walls of our ancestors, but lost to the annals of time. My name is Cullen Taylor Clark, and I've dedicated the last 5 years of my life to documenting the lost history of ethnomycology in Southern Africa, recording the until now unknown role of fungi in indigenous healing rituals, culture, and even worship. My work has taken me from high peaks to dappled forests, from village huts to bustling medicine markets, all to illuminate how integral fungi are to the people of my land. My research has helped find new hallucinogenic mushroom species and record the very first case of psychedelic mushroom use in a tribal setting in Africa. The Lost Muti project is validating long-held traditional remedies, uncovering forgotten names, recipes, and healing practices that have been passed down for centuries, testing their iron against the grindstone of modern science.
But this is where it gets interesting. Along this quest, I discovered something groundbreaking. I found for the very first time hundreds of depictions of never before seen fungi in our rock art. My breakthrough could not only change how we understand ancient transcendental rituals and our ancestors' journey into the spirit world, but could also showcase South Africa as one of the great mycophilic nations of the world, a people that revered and potentially worshipped fungi. My mission is to preserve this knowledge, but I can't do it alone. I need your help for one last push to continue my research. We have leading universities on board, as well as expert guidance from national and global organizations, and even backing and permits from the government here in South Africa to solidify this research for generations to come. All that's needed now is your help. This is more than just research. It's about safeguarding a piece of human history, honoring the wisdom of South African healers. By backing the Lost Muti project, you'll help us preserve this critical heritage. In return, you'll get to join me on this journey. You'll get access to my research, early updates and drafts, exclusive posters and stickers, blogs, articles, webinars, and much, much more. So this is my call to you, whichever continent you may be on. Help me illuminate this hidden legacy that has shaped our very existence, a story deeply tethered to us. Together, we can uncover the Lost Muti of our ancestors.